This week on the 100th episode of the Eldritch Lorecast.
I think that if you are a small publisher creating content for Tales of the Valiant, you are essentially creating content for 5th edition.
I'm under a legal obligation not to discuss that matter.
If we were a group of Power Rangers, what color would each of us be, and what animal would be our Zord?
Okay, here's an actual answer. I was about to just sort of like say some, positive nonsense.
Absolutely not. I refuse.
There's a Haikyuu musical, and that's an anime about volleyball. I don't know what they're doing over there, but I love it.
This game is going to be Pacific Rim meets Power Rangers 2017 meets Detroit Become Human meets X-Men, you know?
The Bastion system coming into one DnD from certain other design spaces.
Well, if you argue with that, you argue with Terry Pratchett, and I dare anyone to argue with Sir Terry Pratchett.
All that and more right now. Cool, 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the 100th episode of the #1 podcast in all the realms. That's right. There have been 100 of these discussions every week, unfailing, unbroken, every single week for the last 2 years. Can you believe it? If you've been around since the beginning, thank you for joining us. And if this is your first episode, my name is Ben Byrne, and I am joined, as always, by Dael Kingsmill, Shawn Merwin, James Hake. And James, this question coming in from JPR, if you were a famous D&D mage, what would the spell with your namesake do?
What an amazing question. I think I would have to be... it needs to be... I want it to be alliterative. Come back to me. Come back to me.
James's jelly plate of catastrophe. All right, I'll give you a second to think. Shawn Merwin.
Shawn's nonsensical non sequitur.
Yeah, totally. What does it do?
I don't know, but I'll tell you, there's something really cool going on outside.
That got me for a second there. All right, very good, very good. Dael Kingsmill.
Mine would be something. I'm close. I'm close to a name. It would be Kingsmill's carrying on, something along those lines. And it would be something that just makes a person like babble, just talk a lot, which would be great in connection with a Zone of Truth.
Okay. Okay. Get two concentrations going on at the same time. Wombo
you
combo.
Can have two spellcasters. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Wombo combo in a social encounter. Yeah. Love it. I think mine would probably be a 5th or 6th level spell of Ben's Blade of Monster Hunting. And it's basically summons a silver sword, and I don't know, does double the damage to every type of creature. James Hake, have we vamped? Given you enough time?
Yeah. You've been fantastic. Mine would have to be Hake's Helpful Happenstance, where something mildly useful but not troublesome to the DM's plans occurs to you.
Okay, cool.
I also like. There's some suggestions in chat. We've got from Jabbat Lucky, Lucky's Aura of Perpetual Lamentation.
Yeah, that tracks with what I know of Chris Lucky.
We've also got some people suggesting Kingsmill's Compulsory Conversation, which is a better name than mine. I will take that from you, J Pizza Beats. Thank you.
Cool. Well, yeah, just a quick, I don't want to lay it on too thick, to be honest, but just a quick thank you to everybody for joining us for this 100th episode. And if you have been listening along for the past little while, if you have a question and you're listening to this in Twitch chat, please throw them in there. We will take as many of them as we can. They don't have to be game related. I am going to try to take a mix of game related ones and non-game related ones, but this is your opportunity to ask anything. We send in, if you want to send in an email, podcast@ghostfiregaming.com for your regular weekly email roundup. But if you want to ask anything at all, such as this question, which I got earlier. I'm just quickly looking for the person who sent it in, but I know the question off the top of my head was, if you were if this podcast, if we were a group of Power Rangers, what color would each of us be, and what animal would be our Zord? I think I got the term correct.
Okay, so can I ask a question?
By Pyrotechnic, sorry, was the one who sent that in. By Pyrotechnic. Go ahead, Shawn.
I literally know nothing about the Power Rangers except about something about colors and choreography, I think. So is there a
Don't
magenta?
worry, Shawn, I got you.
Is there a magenta Power Ranger?
Yeah.
Okay,
yes.
cool.
Super Sentai has there's kind of a personality code to the colors. Once it gets transferred to Power Rangers, it's a little bit less strict. But just bear with me. So Ben, personality-wise, probably fits the Black Ranger. But I think in terms of this podcast group would be the Red Ranger.
Okay, fair.
I want to say Shawn would fit the Sentai personality type of probably the Blue Ranger, but also James is in the running for that. I would either be the Green Ranger or the Yellow Ranger.
I feel like we need more explanation as to these colors specifically.
I refuse.
All right, no, fair.
I think that's good.
The people who know.
Can I be one of those Common Rider style Rangers?
Yes, you can.
With the bug outfit and stuff?
Yes. Yes, you can. Oh, we have to choose animals, but you can choose animals freely.
Okay, cool. Boy Dolphin asking from the chat, what do the four of us hope for the next 100 episodes of the Lorecast? On episode 200, we're going to review our Ranger colors just to see if Dael still agrees. But any thoughts around that?
It's been such a great 100 episodes. I mean, I hope that we have... I hope we have the more... Okay, here's an actual answer. I was about to just sort of say some, positive nonsense.
Sure. But
what I'm going to say is I hope that we have more con shows, live shows we record. I hope that we have more cool guests. Because I always love when the guests come on. And half the time it's because I'm not there. So I want more guests while I'm there so I can hang out with them.
Yeah, I do feel like I need to ask Dante if we can get 5 frames into a YouTube frame at some point because it does feel bad every time there's a guest. It's usually because someone can't make it. I certainly hope we go unbroken in terms of so far we have not had a single week since the launch of this podcast without an episode releasing. Whether it's pre-recorded or not. I hope we can continue that streak. But I also agree with you, James. Within the next 100 episodes, if not the next 50, I would love to get, whether it's at a con or somewhere else, an episode where all 4 of us are in the same space, because those are always really fun to record. Cool. Let me quickly jump over to this question from Edward, the Shark King asked, how do you balance companion NPCs that aren't stealing the show from the party, but also don't need to be babysat or just sit in a corner while the party kind of do the important things? Because I know from personal experience, the fastest way to make a party hate a party follower is for them to be functionally useless in combat. The party always want them to be able to do something, otherwise they are considered to be wet blankets. Thoughts?
The sidekick stat blocks from the Essentials kit do a great job of giving you something as the game master to either you run something, stat block is very, fits on half a page, hand it to a player to use. So if you have an NPC that is supposed to be helpful to the party, those are good. If you have an NPC that's there for a particular dramatic or story-related reason, make up rules on your own for how that works. So, for example, if you have an NPC that the party is supposed to be protecting, don't just say, okay, you have to protect that NPC. And then when the monsters come, everyone is trying to figure out exactly what's going on. Lay out those rules ahead of time. Make it a mini game within the game to say, here's how this works. The monsters are going to try to kill that NPC because that's part of the story. However, this is how we're going to play it. If you are engaged with a monster, it will not take an attack of opportunity to get to that NPC. So there's one way you can stop it. And lay out these rules to make it that sort of thing, because then it adds an element to the game that a lot of people like, which is a tactical bent, but it also tells the story-focused players, okay, these are the parameters in which we have to work. So I'm not going out of my way as the DM to ruin their fun. And then session 0, say, does this sound good to you? Is there anything we could change to make it more fun for you? And then go from there. That's always worked for my games.
We have some folks in the chat suggesting MCDMs, companions, and retainers. And I think that's a great idea. And I want to pair it with Shawn's suggestion of the Essentials Kit / Tasha's companions, and just kind of put them as two equally valid and good options for different, for whatever you want a little bit more. Tasha's, I think, are less detailed but more simple to run, whereas MCDMs are more detailed and therefore maybe more interesting, but also more of a drain on your brain's CPU while you're running the game. So if you've got a system, figure it out, but they're both great.
Yeah. I think great tips for running them. One Shawn's already mentioned, give them to a player to run, because suddenly it feels like something the player is achieving if the NPC is performing well in combat, rather than it being annoying that they're doing well and you're not. On the other end of things, if you don't want them to be too powerful, I think that it's a good idea to, first of all, have them go at the end of the initiative order. Don't roll initiative. Let all the players go first, and then they can do something at initiative 0. And then on top of that, and this kind of pairs with the retainers from MCDM, give them just like a couple kind of cool things that they can do, right? So it is a cool thing and they don't seem useless in combat, but don't give them heaps of stuff or really overly powerful things. Just a couple cool things so that people go, oh damn, that was neat, but it doesn't overwhelm the kind of story of the battle as it unfolds.
Have the cool thing help the party rather than having it solve the problem. And that makes players appreciate it. Oh, you missed that attack. Oh, this NPC, one of their things is they can help you re-roll. They can't take an action on their turn, but they do this. And that makes the player feel better about having this potentially annoying thing with them.
Yeah, also playing with that idea of reactions existing, especially in 5e, right? That's a really cool idea from Shawn there. Like, have them not have actions on their turn, but be able to react. Like the reverse of a legendary action. It's a mundane reaction. Yes.
Ooh, having NPCs work as kind of like a party-wide legendary action. Someone can be like, and I'm going to have the NPC do this at the end of my turn.
Ooh.
That's neat.
It also, like, if you just have a couple of abilities, it also saves you needing to come up with like an entire stat block or something, you know, that needs to run around and be run. Just from a non-combat perspective as well, the way that I tend to run party followers, especially because a lot of my party followers tend to be very important, like, world NPCs. At the moment, my party are escorting around a noble from Astoya. They're very important, politically speaking, to the world in the way that the players are not at this point, or at least the characters are not at this point. But I always tend to make sure that they can give an opinion, which on the last episode, we talked a little bit about, like, how much notice do you give players that a decision they're going to make is going to have massive impacts. Sometimes, I wouldn't, rely on this necessarily, but sometimes a party follower can give information in a way that doesn't feel too meta to help inform the party on a narrative decision that they're going to make, but never have the NPC make the decision. Get them to voice an opinion, but then always say something to the effect of, but I trust in your expertise as my, counsel or experts or whatever, it happens to be, so that the party are ultimately the ones driving the narrative and the story. A question that I really liked came, Mr. Fizzer just said a little while ago in the Twitch chat, what kind of art do you seek out for the intention of inspiring game and character design / writing? Whether this is for a home game that you're running or for design work for something that you are creating for publication.
I have a strong tendency towards movies, not entirely movies, but, movies, video games. When I'm building out my sort of inspiration palette, whether it be for design work or planning a campaign, or even I tend to give these palettes to my players ahead of the game as part of session 0 or whatever, and say, this game is going to be Pacific Rim meets Power Rangers 2017 meets Detroit Become Human meets X-Men, And I think giving them the same inspiration palette that I'm using for design or for campaign writing tends to lend itself to it guides the players in the kind of character choices that they make. And I think that it makes for a neat little thematic resonance between characters. So I do tend towards movies or television or video games in that regard.
Broadly speaking, I think music is the most inspirational thing to me when it comes to creating fiction. But speaking about visual art entirely, there is an old staff artist for Nintendo whose name is Katsuya Terada. And he blends what I think are my two main D&D inspirations, one of which is kind of the bedrock inspiration for D&D, which is like Conan and early pulps. And the other one is The Legend of Zelda. That is my sort of baseline fantasy game, and so that is always present in my D&D games. And he did Zelda art for the first 4 games, Zelda 1, Zelda 2, A Link to the Past, Link's Awakening. And they have this very sort of like muted color palette, very sort of Conan-esque pencil line work, very weird sort of like, sort of Frank Frazetta-esque muscular bad guys. And something about just the look of that art is always what's kind of playing in my head when I'm thinking out, okay, what's the visual appeal of this scene? What does this sort of stark edifice look like? If there's a monster approaching, how does it move? That's a sort of image that I try and create in my mind that I then try and translate into words. And I don't think I've ever 100% hit it on the head, but that's kind of that's the star I strive for as someone who writes things.
Folk are saying in the chat, and I agree with this hugely, is a Pinterest mood board. I have so many Pinterest boards for the different campaigns that I've run, pinning all manner of hags if I'm going to run some hags in a woods, or all manner of vampires, or all manner of landscapes if I'm running it in somewhere like Valaka where everything's frozen. And so that mood board is almost entirely white with different snowy landscapes. Or just images that kind of inspire, a thought, or, I want to run that as a monster. Things that I really love is artwork that has like an epicness to it, but also a dreaminess to it, like almost like those creepy pastas. There's one that somebody did of like Geralt of Rivia, where there's like a monster like far back in the woods and it's all very snowy and faded, and Geralt's like tiny in the foreground with his sword out. It's not explicitly Geralt, but the inspiration's pretty clear. And I love, those sort of pieces that have a fadedness to it, a mutedness to it. And I love an art piece that just kind of scares me a little, not in the AI art way, not in the uncanny valley way, but just a piece that, just is slightly unsettling, very moody. 2 pieces I can think of that I absolutely love. The first is the Crimson Court I think it's the art piece in the Monster Grimoire, which I have in my house. You might see it behind me on some previous episodes of the Lorecast where they're coming down the stairs. And the dude has the glowing eyes. That's incredibly moody and provoking. And the other piece I love, this might come off as a bit of a self-high five, but I don't intend it to. But for an adventure I wrote called Blood in Woodhaven, artist called Helen. She's an Australian artist. Her artist's kind of handle is Juimon, Juimon, if you want to go find her on Twitter or anywhere. But if you just Google Blood in Woodhaven, the cover art is one of the first pieces that will come up in images. And it's just this red, moody, dark image. And the idea that I gave Helen was like, I want this creature to be all shadow on one side, but viscerally real and demonic on the other side. They're sort of, when they're in darkness, they're kind of like an incorporeal creature, but if you shine light on them, they instantly become corporeal. And that was kind of a mechanic around fighting them. But I don't want it to look like they're Two-Face, in the artwork that you do. I couldn't quite imagine it not looking hokey. And the artwork that Helen did for it is incredibly moody and incredibly evocative and perfect as the light hits this individual from 2 different directions, and they just look different from both sides. You can see the more skeletal, monstrous side emerging from the light on one side of the image. So, go check it out. It's an amazing piece.
Visual arts I'm not good with, but what hits me are maps. Blank maps that have big geographical features and blank spaces that we can fill in. because that's where my mind then goes to what would be here, what would fill this up. And that gets my senses flowing, not just in terms of visual, but feel, touch, the smell, that sort of thing. So give me a blank map any day and I can fill it up with hopefully the grandest of things.
I have been fascinated by the kind of art that I think, certainly I can remember art that I experienced when I was young that I think has formed my conception of fantasy, right? And I'm fascinated by finding out what those examples are for other people. And mine were things like my sister had a calendar of the Lord of the Rings art, pre-movie, and those images really sort of soaked in, or we had a second edition board game of Talisman, and those really soaked in. But the one that I always go back to when I'm actually planning stuff for D&D is this Dragon Quest book that we had when we were kids. And it's just one of those books where you find stuff in the picture, and constantly I come back to this and I think, oh, what was that page where there was like a woodsman's hut that was frozen in time? How can I use that in my game? Things like that. There's a carnival at the beginning, and all of these images I keep coming back to time and time again, and I've kept it ever since I was a kid. So that's one, and it's illustrated by Nick Harris.
Question to change tact a little bit. Boy Dolphin asked this, I think both in the Twitch chat when we started this episode, but also sent this to me somewhere. Which is, with the plethora of similar gaming systems hitting the market since the OGL/Orc situation, do we think that small/third-party publishers will, 1, devote themselves to one system primarily, 2, create content with conversion errata for each system, or 3, something else entirely? Short question to encapsulate that a little bit. Where do we think the chips are going to fall in terms of how third-party publishers who maybe aren't Kobold Press or MCDM or Darrington Press, who have created their own bespoke system, going to go?
I think that if you are a small publisher creating content for Tales of the Valiant, you are essentially creating content for 5th edition. And so that will be an easy, compatible with 5th edition and Tales of the Valiant. That's just a stamp on the cover. Based on the direction that we've seen the Tales from the Valiant Alpha playtest going, or the Alpha release. When it comes to the MCDM RPG, that to me seems like a publishing for both D&D and Pathfinder situation, where I think you probably could release the same content for each. You would just need to make sure your mechanical names were different and that your designers or editors knew how to properly change the names, fill in the blanks a little bit. It's entirely possible that the MCDM RPG, and based on the Patreon posts I'm seeing, it does seem this way, will be somewhat incompatible with D&D. And I actually hope that it is. And it'll make it hard for third-party publishers. You will probably have to release 2 different games, or 2 different, release one adventure for this one adventure for this one, or do a full conversion, which might be a big undertaking. But ultimately, I think now that the OGL situation has been settled in a very third-party favorable way, I think that we will still continue to see a lot of 1D&D support in the future. But I really, really hope that the market for, say, the MCDM RPG will remain as sort of fiery as it is now during the playtest, and that it will be able to bear third-party support, because it sounds so exciting. It sounds like it will be a great community.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question, right? Is that Tales of the Valiant is so close to 5e that you're right. And Tales of the Valiant has attached itself to the Orc. Daggerheart and the MCDM role-playing game have not. Is there, I don't know, maybe there's an answer to this out there, but I haven't heard anything so far. Is there going to be the possibility of creating third-party content for Daggerheart or the MCDM role-playing game? Or are they going to keep their license? Are they going to create a license at all, or create a closed one? That's entirely their prerogative in some capacity, but it will shape how their communities shake out.
I suspect, based on just their sort of company ethos, that MCDM would encourage sort of third-party creations based around the MCDM game. I will be interested to see how it goes with Daggerheart, just because having a card-based system automatically puts a little barrier in front of that kind of community creation. It'll be interesting to see how it goes.
Mm.
Yeah, I think Daggerheart may want to, if they want to support third-party creators, they might want to put out some creator pack. It would be a huge show of support, and it would be a huge sign of good faith, I think, more ultimately, too. Just like, when Pathfinder launched, and I might be misremembering this, but I don't think I am, they made everything that they published open to the PFSRD, which allowed people to use basically anything Paizo created in their third-party supplements. That's a huge sign of good faith compared to the relatively walled garden ecosystem of the D20 SRD of that time.
It's one of those things where I don't think they would necessarily be philosophically opposed, but I think that there are just certain physical elements at play there.
The Law Bard asking, and JPR asked this as well ahead of time, so perhaps they are the same individual. Is there a genre or setting or grand idea for a game or campaign that you've had but haven't been able to run yet? Something that's sat in the back of your head but you've never... I thought JPR was J Pizza Beats. That's what I thought. Oh well, same question from two different people. Question stands.
I got to do Aurora, so I'm happy. Although if I had to, I love the idea of an evil campaign, but not the kind of evil campaign that, like, after they play one game, everyone wants to run out and play a campaign where they just slaughter everything. But where it's sort of like Robin Hood, but instead of playing Robin Hood, you play the Sheriff of Nottingham and their brood, who are sort of stuck in the middle, right? King John is there and he's bad, and you serve King John, but you're always worried that King Richard is going to come back. And what happens then? And you have other nations that are out there that are on the precipice of war. There's always, at the drop of a hat, there could be something. So you're sort of, you can be evil, but you're also juggling responsibility. And I have always wanted to see a campaign that uses that. So it's not just senseless slaughter, but it's using tactics that maybe a normal role-playing game fantasy hero wouldn't use in order to keep the power that you have that's always constantly in favor of toppling.
I would love to do a campaign where there is no distinction between overworld and underworld. This is an entire sort of social ecosystem that has grown within a dungeon, and you are people within it. You have your clans and your cities, and they're all within this large underground expanse. It's like an idea that I've had in my head for something like 10 years now, and that I've just never had the spark to actually start acting on it. When Undertale came out in 2015, that was probably the closest I ever got to acting on that, because the concept is kind of the same. But it's a cool idea that I'm sure someone who is extremely passionate about it would do better than I could.
I am probably my most ambitious game concept that I will probably never end up running. People out there might know that I started from a very nerdy place. My earliest role-playing was in forum-based play-by-post role-plays. So it was, this is an X-Men role-play game, and we all had our characters, and we would, trade off. Basically, one of you writes a little narrative from your character's perspective, and then the next person posts from their character's perspective, responding to yours, and you kind of build out the story that way. Very, very nerdy, deep nerd stuff. But I have an idea that has sat in the back of my head for ages that you could run a really cool sort of West Marches style game where you have a guild of adventurers, and players can, pick their adventures, go out and play D&D and do these things, but also in between that time have a forum set up on Discord or wherever where they can, spend their time in between adventures, writing out their kind of downtime stuff at the guild hall or in the town, interacting with each other. So you would get all of that nerdy, good, juicy downtime roleplay interaction for anyone who can't, dedicate 4 hours this week to the adventure or whatever. And I think that would be fun.
I always had an idea for a campaign. I mean, I have notebooks that are filled with the corpses of old campaign ideas, ideas that I did run, but it's always fascinating for me to go back and look at what the original idea was and the original notes I took were and what that campaign ended up being. I ran an entire campaign that was like a civil war between an unjust ruler and a violent rebel that started when I saw Senua from Senua's Sacrifice on the cover of Game Informer or something. And I was like, I didn't know what the game was at that point. I was like, that looks like a cool NPC. And she's holding a skull. So she's a warlock that kind of gets information from this skull that tells her she's the prophet of a god, and she believes it. And so she's leading this rebellion. And the character ended up being not like that at all. Incredibly pragmatic, like barbarian style Goliath. So I'm always interested to see how my ideas will evolve. The one I have at the moment, it's a pretty standard D&D campaign, but basically it's a nobleman or a would-be king. It's kind of a Lady Stoneheart style plot where they were killed and their army destroyed, but they've been resurrected as a wraith, and they are growing in power and raising spirits of the Deep Roads kind of style spirit army from soldiers that were loyal to them in life. But the party kind of have to reverse engineer the political intrigue that happened at the time and where their bloodline is now and where those that killed them are now, the descendants of those people, and decide, well, this ghost guy kind of has a point. Maybe we don't stand in his way, or we really need to stop this ghost guy and his ghost army because they're going to ghost up the place and we don't want that. So a sort of, regional apocalypse, and the party have to unravel some mystery that is tied to it. Question here from Mr. Mr. Fizzer. What is a game mechanic that we see penetrating into the 5e space from indie RPGs over the next year or so? Something that's already diffused into the design space. Something like perhaps the Bastion system coming into one D&D from certain other design spaces.
Wait, this is getting me to wonder what the Bastion system is. Have I missed something?
It was talked about very briefly at Gen Con by J. Craw and Chris Perk. I'm not sure what his abbreviation is yet. But basically it's a look. I don't want to be redundant here or reductive is the word I'm looking for. But kind of a strongholds and followers style. Create a bastion for your party beyond just them, a place for them to call home, so to speak. A bastion is my understanding of it.
Like a franchise from Acquisitions Incorporated.
Yeah, there
just
you go.
To throw off something that's already in a Wizards of the Coast published product.
That's fair.
But yeah.
That's fair.
Or like a stronghold from a not Wizards of the Coast product.
Precisely. I see something along the lines of that sort of meta currency that we've talked about with certain games like Fate and Savage Worlds, where you have more control over the narrative by spending this currency, which then gives the game master a currency which they can use then to spend to make life harder for you, which then passes back to you. That is something that's been in indie games for a while and hasn't quite made its way into more tactical games. Inspiration, as we've talked about before, was an attempt to do it, but it was sort of a half measure that wasn't well described and was a little too loose for a lot of people to get their hands and minds around. So that might be something that we see a little more of going forward.
Sorry, I shouldn't have That wasn't for you. That was a for me.
Oh my god!
I want to be told I'm wrong, so that's fine. Please do. Come at me.
I feel like for me, I see a lot in the indie RPG design space right now, and I don't know how it'll fit in with future renditions of D&D. But right now, I am seeing a trend of everyone getting sick of the D20 system. Everyone is moving into new, innovative versions of I don't know what you would call it, like mechanical decision making, the role of fate within the game.
Yeah, maybe it is a sick of kind of situation, but slight devil's advocate, a differentiate situation where it's like, well, how do we design something that doesn't feel like 5e? Let's go and seek something out. The D20 works perfectly well. It could still be used, but it's like, well, we don't want it to look like it could be played with 5e, so we want to try something entirely new, which is kind of enforced innovation, I suppose.
I think to a certain extent that is true, but I don't think it's the entire reason for people experimenting with it, because I think that we're seeing people moving away from other similar systems as well. Like, people aren't just, going to, let's make a D12 system or whatever. People are, or, percentile. People are moving away from dice to a surprising extent. People are looking for new things that can generate that same element of chance. So I don't know what kind of an impact that'll have on official D&D, but I suspect we'll start seeing a lot of homebrew that tries to implement stuff like that.
I mean, I'm excited by Daggerheart's kind of succeed or fail with hope, or succeed or fail with fear. My trepidation around that is that it puts pressure potentially on the game master to improvise a lot more and figure out how this is a successful thing that's happened with bad consequences. But it's an exciting kind of non-binary, like, success or fail that I'm kind of excited to see play out at the table, and what you can do with that when you tell stories.
A Fantasy Flight Star Wars system already made us do that, basically, and it was a problem there.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people had a rough onboarding with that system, because what does a failed roll but you gained advantages from it mean for the fiction? And eventually people they figured it out, but it's not an easy onboarding. And I think that what the Daggerheart designers have seen is that is a very powerful storytelling device if you know how to use it.
Sure.
So the trick is, how do you tell people how to use it?
Yeah, I can imagine after like the 6th or 7th roll in a combat in a night, it's just like, yeah, you hit him and I don't know, stub your toe on a rock that's nearby. Moving on, next person's turn. Question here coming in from Always Correct, which is perhaps prophetic for their question. What are your favorite colors, and why are the other hosts' answers wrong? Now, I know my answer to this. I guess I will open myself up to rebuttal. Blue is the S tier of colors. Although red's pretty good too.
Ben, you're simultaneously wrong and right, because purple is the best color.
Okay, well, all right. Okay, yeah, I can get on board with that. I mean, wait, no, I can't. Purple's a Don't mix two great things. Keep them separate. Sorry, I need to get in the spirit of the question.
I have to, okay, so for me, I have a synesthetic answer and then a separate answer. So green has been my favorite color in sort of title since I was a child, because my name, synesthetically speaking, is green to me. But I really do genuinely love the color pink. And that's something that I've been attached to because I was such a tomboy as a kid. But as a grown-up, I'm really proud of the fact that even in my most tomboyish days, I never was like, ew, pink sucks. I hate pink. I was like, no, pink is a color and it is dope. So I'm very proud of Tiny Dael.
Those are all fine answers, but we know that the best color is octarine, the color of magic.
I did not know what that color.
A greenish yellow purple that can only be seen by wizards. And you, a non-wizard, might be able to see it when you close your eyes, but just briefly.
Oh, okay. I just thought it was purple because that word gets used so much in Dungeons of Drakenheim.
I don't have it in me to argue with that.
Thank you. Well, if you argue with that, you argue with Terry Pratchett, and I dare anyone to argue with Sir Terry Pratchett.
I know. He's found a way to beat us all. Can't believe it.
The OP color, says Kato Flex.
That's right.
Roman Fail asking in the Twitch chat, with the slow demise of Twitter, what would we say is the best way to network now for new designers, testers, etc., to network in the tabletop RPG space?
I have 2 key pieces of advice. First of all is find a platform where you can focus on creating your own thing. So for me, that was YouTube. Reddit is a great place to make your own stuff, design, put it out there. There's a lot of communities where that kind of thing is, encouraged. The second piece of advice is make sure to put a contact piece of information in your piece of whatever it is. So if you are publishing on DM's Guild, put a business email that people can contact you at if they want to collaborate on something. If you're on YouTube, make sure that you have a business email attached to that so that people who like your stuff, who want to work with you, will be able to reach out to you. And then hopefully other people will also be doing that and you can do the same.
Yeah. That's a great advice.
Yeah. I think James and I are in the same boat here. We're like, networking. I don't know. I don't know if social media and networking mean the same thing to the same people, because there's certain kinds of networking that you can do via social media, and there's certain kinds of game design networking that you want to be as far away from social media as possible to do. So there's several answers, but the best answer is find a community that you can respond to that will respond to you, and create an audience while being an audience to other people. And that's the best kind of networking you can do, because then you are not only building an audience, but you're also building skills via the audience that you are to really become the best version of yourself as a designer that you can be. And that's the most important thing. All things will flow from that.
I want to say in regards to all of this, that whether your platform of choice is a subreddit or a large Discord community, or actually I would say those two are our biggest examples, because those are very community focused as opposed to something like Twitter, which is totally diffuse. When you're in a community like that, do your best to not just self-promo. When you create content and put it out there, people can smell a grifter from a mile away. And unfortunately, in this context, someone who just posts their video there or posts their homebrew there so that people will see it or buy it or whatever, that's a grift. They will view it as pure cynical engagement farming. But if you're a member of the community, you participate in other discussions, or I would say that this can be somewhat successful if you post something and then say, this is what I think, but I'm not sure. What do you think? Then you've started a discussion. You've added something of value to the overall community. So if you want to network, I would say find a community, and without intent of getting something out of it, start participating. And then, after a little while, then start being like, hey, I made this. What do you think? Do all that. You got to build a foundation first.
Yeah, you really have to join a community out of a genuine sense of interest and engagement and wanting to be a part of a community. You can't just try to use a community and co-opt them for your own stuff, because it just doesn't work.
Quick question coming in from, let me find it. I had it here a second ago. Prime Gaming Hench on the bench. I'm very proud that I got, because it's all one word. I got that in one, I hope.
Nice.
Asking, Full Metal Alchemist or Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood?
Now we're talking.
I haven't watched either.
No, well, this is why I was hoping to get James's recommendation, basically, because I have
All
heard
right, there
that
we
there
go.
are differences here.
Now, if you just want the short answer, it's got to be Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. But there are pros and cons to both. For instance, I think, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood was made after the whole manga was written. So it's the whole story. The thing with the 2003 FMA is that it starts really strong. I would say its first half is the same content as Brotherhood, but better. But its second half, they just go up and make some stuff up. And I gotta say, the stuff they make up is not as good as the stuff the original author made up. It's an interesting little curiosity, and it's worth watching. But FMAB, that's the full experience. If you're really, really particular about it, maybe I don't know, watch the first half of FMA 2003 and then the second half of FMAB. But that's a wild person's decision. Just watch FMAB. It's a great anime. Or read the manga. Maybe that's a real snob answer.
Are you looking forward to the inevitable live action version, or does that already exist? I feel like I've seen.
There's a Japanese live action version.
Oh, okay.
And I've never watched it.
Okay.
I don't feel like I need to. The anime and the original comic books are so good that I couldn't care less about any adaptation someone makes. Unless they make a stage adaptation. I would get tickets to that just for the wild nonsense of it. And they do that a lot. There's 3 Death Note musicals. There's a Haikyuu musical, and that's an anime about volleyball. I don't know what they're doing over there, but I love it.
Question that came in via podcast@ghostfiregaming.com. Was a quick one for this episode, which is Shawn or James, have either of you had to take a driving detour because the route was blocked by witches' hats? Do you have any clue what I'm referring to?
Traffic cones?
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought that one was universal. And then
I can't say I've ever heard them called witches' hats before, except maybe by kindergartnners.
I am under a
that
legal.
feels like
I'm under a legal obligation not to discuss that matter, or the wanton goat rampage incident, or the Great Canadian Watermelon incident of 1998. My attorneys are telling me that I cannot mention those anymore.
Kato Flex asking, what is one house rule that you have for 5e that you can't live without? My house rule that I can't live without is not flanking.
Mm-hmm.
Does that count?
Good answer.
I don't know if this is a house rule or this is in the DMG. There's a good possibility this is in the DMG. But it's the rule that states if you move a second diagonal square on a grid, it counts as 10 feet of movement instead of 5. And it basically corrects the fact that if you ran the same distance in every direction, it would create a circle, not a square. It does make combats a little bit fiddly sometimes, especially when you're measuring the range of a spell or a ranged attack, needing to count every second diagonal that you kind of count along at an angle. But without it, the game to me feels a lot more. The physics feel really bouncy, like people can just run anywhere and kind of get to any location. So that is a rule that I enforce, much to my players' chagrin.
I have
that's a
spent
core rule from 3rd edition.
months of my life waiting for people to count squares without doing the 5, 10. Yeah, 5, 10. If you add that to the mix, it would have been years of my life instead of months of my life waiting. Sorry, was that 30 or 35? Wait, let me try this again. 5, 15, 20, 30. Wait. Did you go? I can't go. 5, 15, 20. No. Just no.
I am considering dropping grid combat entirely and moving to free form measured combat in a not going to theater of the mind, but going to almost like a war game solution where you just use a tape measure and an inch still equals 5 feet, but it's not locked to a grid, so you can kind of measure in any direction.
I think that is perfect if you have players who are familiar with wargaming, because I tried to introduce it to players who weren't, and it was bad.
Yeah, I don't.
Not that it was bad; they just fully didn't get it.
Yeah, okay.
How
Yeah, I'm
close
not
do
sure.
you
Baldur's
have
Gate
to
3
be
works?
to be adjacent? Then do you have to be within a half inch?
That's a good.
Within
that's
a
a
quarter
good
inch?
question.
Within 3/4 of an inch?
Base-to-base contact.
I
what
would
is it?
say
Yeah.
probably for D&D, I would say probably you would have to be, like, if you are within an inch of your target, you are within melee range. So that could be, off by a millimeter in theory, but I don't know that I would measure that closely. But I'm not sure whether this, like, introducing this into my game is going to speed it up for the very reason that you said, Shawn, of going 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, because I'm moving straight
it's not 25.
now another diagonal. Whether that's going to speed it up or whether that's going to slow it down because somebody has to draw it out a tape measure every time somebody moves or casts a spell.
Cosmic Postman just put a great question in chat. I'm breaking the order here. I'm jumping in. Cosmic Postman asks, where do each of you draw the line between hacking 5e and actually playing a different game? This is an awesome question. To me, the line is no more classes. Once I take classes out, I may be playing a D20 game with attacks and saves, but I'm not playing 5th edition anymore.
Interesting. For me, I feel like this has probably become clear for people who watch my videos, but if I am still hacking from a 5e base, no matter how far I get from it, I'm going to still think of it as a hack rather than its own game. I would have to be starting from scratch or starting from a different game if I was to think of it as a different game. And my house rule that I can't live without, because I did figure out what my one true answer is that I change how death saves work with stuff. So if you're unconscious and you get hit, you don't automatically suffer a crit and lose 2 death saves. Instead of that, I just make it so that you have to roll death saves when you get hit, even outside of your turn, and you can only fail them. You can't, like, succeed them.
Oh,
if that makes sense.
That's great. Yes.
So it's just a little bit muted.
Yeah, because often once somebody goes down, for them it can turn into, like, especially if you've got a creature like, let's just say, a vampire, that's goal is to drink blood and, like, massacre the party member. They're not necessarily going to stop because that character is not fighting back anymore. So I've had that real problem of how do I create a narrative reason that this monster doesn't just, in Matt Colville's famous words from one of his earliest videos, I stomp on his head to make sure that he's dead, So I think that's a great house rule.
I did say something just then and no noise came out of
No, I heard
mouth.
it. You said it. Yeah. Yeah, great. Shawn, were you going to say something just then?
Absolutely not. I refuse.
Fair enough. He has played the 5th, or one of the numbers.
I thought of a house rule that I can't live without, and it's my friends schedule the D&D sessions.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
If I'm in charge of scheduling D&D, we're going to play like once a month. I'm going to forget. I'm going to get busy. I am going to stress about it and get avoidant. No, if my friends who really, really want to play, they will do it. They will do it. And I will say, and I'm free these days. And it will work out great. We'll play every 2 weeks or so.
Thank you to everybody who's asked questions. I think we're just about going to have to wrap this up because we're running out of time. But I have one thing I want to do. I had thought of this a few days ago and then I forgot before this morning. So to finish out the 100th episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, thank you very much if you've been listening to this on an audio platform or YouTube after the fact. Thank you very much for asking your questions, whether you sent them in early or have been asking them here on Twitch. The last thing I wanted to do is get the Twitch chat's opinion on, and I don't think these have been made public before, some of the original names that we were going to call the podcast before the hosts voted on the Eldritch Lorecast. This is not the full list. FYI, the full list was like 20 names. Here, I think I have about maybe 7 or 10. And we can decide what people prefer the most. All right.
I'm excited for this.
Give it, let's say, a number out of 5 for whether you would vote for it. All right, number 1, The Wizard's Tower. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of The Wizard's Tower, the number 1 podcast. What do we think? 5, 1, somewhere in between?
Put your votes in chat.
3, okay.
Wait, what's good? Is 1 or 5? No,
5's good.
5
1 is like,
good.
I would not listen to this podcast. Getting a couple 2. Yeah, 2's taken over.
A lot of
All right.
2s.
Okay, pretty
Yeah,
average.
it's like a 3. It's sufficient.
Wow,
but
Chris Hopper calls it mid.
Mid is exactly the word I'd use.
Mhm.
All right, fair enough. All right, the Eldritch Lorecast, obviously that's what we ended up with. I have 3 stars next to it, meaning that 3 people voted for it, i.e. the 3 of you. Because I think I asked for like 3 preferences or something, and so that one won. The Dragon's Dungeon. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Dragon's Dungeon. We're in the
I forgot that one.
Yeah, a very SEO-driven name, I feel. One of you voted for it. Don't know
Whoa!
who. Yeah.
We'll all turn on each other. I gotta find my votes. I'm looking up this email.
Yeah,
I'm not looking it up. I'm going to be surprised. Past me, it's a different person.
This one's fun, but it's a little bit silly. One person voted for it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Pact of the Podcast. My name is Ben Byrne here with Dael Kingsmill, Shawn and James Hake. Pact of the Podcast.
It's more original than everything else we've heard so far.
Okay.
I'll give it that.
All right. Yeah, it's getting some 3s and 4s. Chris Hopper kind of likes that. Okay. Chris Hopper, we are christening you the judge of these officially, if we have to rename. All right, this one somebody voted on as well. I'm going to assume it was Shawn for reasons. This one, the Arcanist Inquisition, which is a faction from Grimhollow. So that's why it was thought of originally. And we would be inquiring into the industry and things. I'm going to assume that there's 5s for the Arcanist Inquisition. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Arcanist Inquisition.
Yeah, see, I must have voted for that one because that's got a little bit of a higher 99. There we go. Forester man. Yes.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the College of Bards. Getting some
College
3s in
of
there.
something could be something.
That's
College
very
of
interesting
Bards.
that you say that, James, because I found my email and I wrote, I like College of Bards, but maybe College of Law instead.
I have that in brackets underneath College of Bards. Getting 1s and 2s. All right. 1s and 2s for Bards, I'm assuming. College of Law. Do we feel better about that? I think I do as well. College of Law, much better. All right. 1.5. It's only mildly better. All right, here we get into some really SEO ones.
So vague, so evocative. Thank you, Elon _Musk _sticks. You're the voice of the people.
The intelligence save. Which really seems kind of insulting after the fact, especially considering we weren't colleagues of 2 years at that point, me making a joke on each of our intelligences. The intelligence
That's funny.
save.
I thought that went in the other direction because I said I liked intelligence save, but I thought it might set up high expectations.
Oh, right, that's fair.
And it turns out you were right.
No, I actually like that. Like, the idea is that it's the intelligence save for the industry as the industry kind of, has its happenings every Thursday or Wednesday. There's an intelligence saving throw. The next one, the charisma check, which I feel is there is definitely a universe where we're all much more like Chad, or we're all much more like kind of bros, like, hey, yeah, like we're like wearing caps backwards and we're like video game journalists from the 90s specifically. And we call it the charisma check. I
think charisma check is decent.
You like that one?
It's decent, but we need to like all be actors or something. We need to have a secondary career that makes the punny title work.
That's true. The final one that I have here, the challenge rating.
Man, we really slam dunked with Eldritch Lorecast, didn't we?
Yeah.
I mean, yes, but I'm not gonna lie. This was my reaction. Lucky we didn't go with the challenge rating because we would be broken in that circumstance. But My reaction when the three of you voted for the Lorecast was, really? All right.
Really? Wow.
Not because I thought it was bad, but just because I thought it was like the most, I suppose, vague and evocative, the most kind of like nothing name that didn't really mean much on its own. But now it means us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brought that in for that landing.
That was good. That was good. I like that one.
All right. Well, with that, let us close out the 100th episode of the Eldritch Lorecast. Thank you so much for watching. If you've been here in Twitch, on the audio platforms like Spotify or iTunes or wherever, or on YouTube, we will be back next week with another episode. If you're watching this on Twitch, there's not going to be a stream next week because this is it. But this episode will go up next week. But otherwise, if you're listening to this after the fact, there will be a stream next week at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Monday Australian. It's Tuesday for the American time zones. I always forget to mention that bit. And we will be back next week, so we will see you then. I've been Ben Byrne, as always, with James Hake, Dael Kingsmill, Shawn Merwin, ba-ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba.
100 bubba-da-buzz more.
All for you.
Count them out. Count them out.